Hello, everybody. This is Jason with another episode of the Inked Up Runner. I have today someone that he didn't even know that I was watching him, but we were at a similar race. I was crewing a buddy, and he was running the same race, um, and um, and I've been meaning to get him on the show, for a while now. And I'm speaking with ultra runner, race director, outdoor enthusiast, Corey Alexander. Thank you for joining me, Corey. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Jason. I'm happy to be here.
Cool. So, we were talking briefly before. Corey ran Hellbender this year. My friend John ran Hellbender this year. And Hellbender was an ass kicker of a race this year. It's a hard race already, out of my wheelhouse. But this year it was really tough because there was rain at the beginning, then it got really humid and hot, and then depending on where you were on the course, it rained on you again. So I guess did you before we get into that, it was a really tough weather event, wasn't it?
Yeah, for sure. It was probably the toughest weather I've ever ran through, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. So I guess before we get into the good time at Hellbender, how did you get into doing all this crazy running stuff?
That's a great question. I am unlike a lot of other runners. I did not run when I was young. I never was exposed to running until I played a lot of sports, did a lot of backpacking. Lived in a very active family. Like we were always outdoors and doing something cool. But I never, like, my parents didn't run. My brothers and sisters didn't get into running until even we were all out of high school. So I didn't find running until I was in my late 20s, and my brother and sister had started running, and they were doing pretty well. They were running marathons, and I actually never even tried running. I rode mountain bikes and did other things, but I actually was having a beer with my brother one day, and he was like, I have this race coming up in Tennessee, and he was like, it's always kind of weird that I finish a race and nobody's ever there. Like I don't like he wasn't married at the time, and he was like, nobody ever comes and watches me, so I just like finish these races and I'm like by myself. And so I decided to surprise him, and I just showed up at the race, and it turned out to be the Pistol Ultra in Alcoa, Tennessee, and he ran the 100K, which it's like a paved ultra, which I thought was really awful sounding. Um, but I showed up, and in the meantime of watching him run for 12 hours, on the way home, I was like, man, my brother runs, my sister runs, like I'm fairly athletic. I was like, my other brother plays soccer and did really well in college, and I was like, maybe our family's more athletic than I even know we are, and maybe I should try it. And I actually just went home and started the Couch to 5K program, and next thing I knew, I was running ultras.
Did you follow the model that everybody else does, where you just progressively went up, or did you just jump straight from like the 5K distance straight into the ultra distance? Did you go after a marathon or anything like that?
I definitely, at the very beginning, I got kind of hooked on doing some local 5Ks, 10Ks. I did one half marathon, and but then I started like going out with my brother. He was already into trail ultras, and I started realizing that my backpacking experience and the amount of time I've spent on trails, I just really enjoyed being on the trails more. So I feel like I was already, pretty experienced in putting big miles in on a trail. I just had never done it in a running form. So as I quickly progressed through just getting faster and having enough base miles and getting, fit enough to start trail running, I quickly transitioned over to long distance trail running. I never ran a road marathon. I had never even run a 50K, and my very first ultra was a 50 miler. So I kind of jumped from half marathon to 50 miles, which is, maybe not the way that most people would think you would do it. But I think my experience on the trails and just knowing, from my backpacking days, I knew what it took to put a lot of miles in on a trail, and it just felt more normal to me than to go out and try to run a fast marathon.
Yeah. And so that first 50 miler, that was in Chattanooga, wasn't it?
It sure was. I ran the Chattanooga 50 miler.
And and that is a really, that's a really good course. And I think it's actually a pretty good, uh, I think, first 50-mile race from the standpoint of, I know when I did it that, the course isn't terribly hard. It's very runnable. And it's easy to kind of, I guess nothing's really easy, but I guess it's easier than, say, like the Georgia Death Race, from the standpoint of, it's a lot more runnable. So how did that go? Was it a pretty smooth first, ultra race for you?
It went really well. It was probably to this day still one of my fastest performances because, I think that being my first ultra, number one, I think I thought I was faster than I was, coming from, trying to run road racing type paces and, going to a 50-mile trail race. I had these like really dumb high expectations of what I thought I could do, pace wise. So I ran really fast for the first 25 miles. And of course, that was, something I needed to learn. And I blew up a little bit, from about mile 25 till 35. I was like struggling pretty hard. But then after that, it sort of came back around and, my legs came back to me. And I actually ran the last 10 to 15 miles of that race as fast as I ran the first 15 and ended up performing pretty well. I think I was like 20th, top 20 in my very first ultra, which, probably gave me the confidence thinking that I would always be able to do that. And of course, that's not been the case. It's been, in fact, total opposite. So one of my best finishes, but, for not having ever run an ultra to just throwing myself in a 50 miler, it actually went pretty well.
Yeah, and that's a great thing about ultra running is, the way it's pretty much like a lot of sports where you have your good days and your bad days. But that course, I really like it a lot. It's a very scenic and beautiful course. I know it's funny, the year that I did it, there were a couple issues with people messing with the course marking, and I actually got off course twice and ended up running 3 miles more than I should have. Um, yeah, which was some bonus miles, which, I actually ended up still having a pretty decent day, all things considered. But it's a great course. So it looks like, you went pretty aggressive after the Chattanooga 50, because you tackled GDR after that, right?
I did GDR. So Chattanooga 50 miler, I actually signed up for Chattanooga on purpose because I was looking for a qualifier because I actually entered the Georgia Death Race lottery before I had ever run an ultra before because I crewed my brother there. I had volunteered there. I knew all about GDR and I had hiked the AT a few years before that. So I knew the Georgia mountains really well. And I knew that if I was going to do an ultra, I wanted to do something like GDR where it was pretty hard, but I needed a qualifier. So I signed up for Chattanooga on purpose for that. So it's kind of funny that I had never ran an ultra before, but I was already through the lottery for GDR, and then had to quickly like run a 50 miler so I could actually qualify for my spot in GDR. And then GDR was my second ultra, and probably to this day still one of my favorite running experiences ever. I had a blast at Georgia Death Race. I loved every part of it.
So what made it so much fun for you?
Um, I think just the buildup of the trash talking and the race director saying you're going to die and you're not going to make it. And I think that I sort of tend to, same reason I love Hellbender. I like really look for the hardest. I pride myself in trying to tackle the hardest stuff you can get your hands on. So I think I really like that, somebody telling me I can't do it. And I had other ultra runners telling me it was really stupid that I'd, signed up for GDR before I had really had any experience. I had never ran a 50K or anything. And I think I just really prided myself on just being like, I know I can do it and I'm just going to go do it. And then it just turned out to be a really great day. And I really enjoyed the course. The stairs up the waterfall at the end, I think are a phenomenal part of the course. And it's hard. I mean, it's not any. I was on course for 21 hours. Like it takes me a long time, but I really do like how hard it is.
Oh, absolutely. And you talked about hiking some of the AT. Did you section hike it, or how much of the AT did you hike?
I really wanted to do the whole thing, but I waited too late in life, and I couldn't get enough time off of work.
Hmm.
So I actually section hiked the first 500 miles of it. I hiked from Georgia to Damascus, basically.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's a hell of a section to hike, though. So, I mean, that's pretty amazing. I really enjoy that, and I'm the same way. I can't get off work to tackle such a big uh, piece of trail like that. But I just got into backpacking myself, and a buddy and I are going to go into the Smokies this coming weekend and do like a little loop up there, because that's about all I can get off work for 3 or 4 days to go up there and kind of mess around up there and do some hiking. So it's great. And I think the great thing about hiking and backpacking is it's so much similar to ultra running, but different at the same time, right? It's different because of the pacing, but it's similar because you're like on a journey, right? And you start and you have to end somewhere, and it's very, very similar. So do you do a whole lot of backpacking still, or do you just kind of just do it here and there when you can?
Just here and there when I can. Honestly, I wish I could do it a lot more. Backpacking was my first true love. Even as a teenager and a young man, I really, really loved backpacking. And I think the transition to ultra running from backpacking feels like a natural progression. And a lot of it had to do with my daughter being born. As a father, you can't just always take off for 4 or 5 days and go on backpacking trips. So I think that's why ultra running and trail ultra running, especially, sort of felt like, well, I can still do, 40, 50, or 75 or 100 miles, but instead of doing it on a 4 day backpacking trip, I'm just going to run it all tomorrow. And, I think that I do the one thing I love ultra running, and I think the one thing that I really do miss about long distance backpacking is the sleeping on the mountain at night and the preparing your food. I do miss that aspect of backpacking. That sometimes 4 or 5 or 6 days just aiming yourself in one direction, and on the AT, it just always felt you know pretty great to just say I'm going north, and you really have nothing else to do except get some miles in, set up your tent, and cook some food and filter water. And I love the simplicity of it. I think I love that about ultra running is like you just have a great pair of shoes and a backpack, and you just go out and attempt these crazy things, and the only thing I'm not doing is sleeping. You know, and running Hellbender, I wanted to sleep so bad. I kind of wished it had been a backpacking trip. I wish I could have laid down and went to sleep.
So so you got GDR under your belt, and then from there, you just kind of bounced around and did several different types of races. One that really stands out to me, and it's because it's somewhat local, it's local to me, is you did the Mid-State Mile. What did you think about that one?
I absolutely adore the Mid-State Mile, but I did not have a good day when I showed up there. Um, the Mid-State Mile hit me at this point where Becca had messaged me. I know Becca and John, the race directors, and she had messaged me the very first year before it had ever started. And she was like, "Hey, I'm trying to put together this really crazy race on my parents' farm. Do you want to come down?" And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds great." But it sort of hit me at a time in my life where it was in the middle of summer and I hadn't been training very well. And um, I just hadn't been, running very good during that block of my life. And it's a very, very hard race. And I think what really got me was, the loop times that they have there. They give you 20 minutes per loop. And that format, it just made it really difficult. I felt like from the very beginning that was too fast for me. I couldn't keep up with like every loop I was coming in with like, 40 seconds to spare and just didn't have enough time to have any sort of aid or you couldn't even sit down and like take any sort of breather because then they would fire the pistol again and you had to run and you had to be in the corral like or you got disqualified. So I felt like I was like playing catch up the entire run. And I mean, I made it 5 hours before I, got cut, but I think I would love to go back and try a Mid-State Mile, but I think I would like to do their version that they do in December, where it's like a timed race where it's 24 hours or 12 hours, and there's no loop time. Because I think I could do really well. I can do hard things for a really long time. I just can't do them as fast as a lot of the runners at Mid-State Mile that first year. They probably eliminated half the field in the first 6 hours. I mean, it felt very fast paced, and I'm just not a fast enough runner to be able to compete in that field, in that format at least.
And it's funny when you say that because you're talking about a mile in what 20 minutes, right?
It's 1.2 miles in 20 minutes.
In 20 minutes. So 1.2 miles. I've been on the course before, and it's funny when you say that, most people would think to themselves, how hard can it be to go 1.2 miles in 20 minutes? But that course is so unforgiving in spots where it's easy to either blow up early from going too fast or just being worn down from just all the different climbing that you're doing. And but to your point, it seems like, I think now people know what to expect out of it. So they're showing up a lot differently now, right? They're a lot more trained for it. And I think probably if you went back, you would probably go back a lot more trained and different, knowing what the actual course looks like, knowing that you need be able to really be able to tackle that climb at the beginning of it pretty aggressively, just so that you can get in at a decent time to get food, because there are guys there that had it down to to a science, to where they knew exactly how much time they needed to get in, to get aid, to go to the bathroom, and then to get there and start again when it needed to do. But it's terribly hard, and from the standpoint of any of those looped timed races are very, very hard. Those backyard style races, um, I've never really done one. I went to the Mid-State Mile and watched some of it, but those backyard events just look brutal from the standpoint of just having to keep moving, and you're such short on time, and you got to hurry up and be ready to go. It's such a it's smart but very, very hard. So one thing else that it was interesting, is you race direct, right? So talk a little bit about how you got into race directing, and then talk a little bit about the races you have, when they are, the courses, all that kind of good stuff, so everybody knows about those.
Okay. So race directing is not something that I just woke up one morning and said I was going to try to do. I feel like I was building towards it for a while. Even before race directing, I put together events, quite often, and was pretty successful at it. I did charity events. Um, I had started several running clubs, and um, I feel like that I had started realizing that I was pretty good at putting together an event and making it something fun that people would want to be a part of. And it just turns out that I started a running group in the little town I lived in here in North Carolina, and it was at a brewery. It was like a pub run, and the brewery approached me and they were like, "Hey, we've been thinking about maybe putting on like a 5K race or whatever. We don't know anything about running, and we know you're doing the run club here. Would you like to be the race director and help us put it on?" And I was like, "Yes, I've like been thinking about becoming a race director. Like it's something that's been on my mind." So I did that, and it was extremely successful. I had no clue what I was doing, but figured it out pretty quickly, and it just went really well. And then also, I had been volunteering at ultras for a while. I really just had I wanted to dive deep into the behind the scenes of what it takes to put on an ultra, I guess. And I had run several aid stations, and my great friend Aaron Saft, who is the race director of Hellbender, before Hellbender was even a thing, he had like 8 other races. So I always wanted to volunteer and help him with like, putting the aid stations together. And, I was always bouncing questions off him and learning. And I was just very interested in all the details of, what race directing looked like. And the more and more experience I had, just like being at races and helping with races, and the thought process that goes into what a great race is made of just really interested me, and I found a lot of joy in it. So I just happened to live in this little town in Western North Carolina called Canton. It's a tiny little mill town about 30 miles west of Asheville, and got just gorgeous mountains. I mean, it's got the Shining Rock Wilderness and Middle Prong Wilderness and all these great wilderness areas, but you can't put a race on a wilderness area. So I was sort of starting to think that like Haywood County didn't have a race, and I was like looking around, and I trained and ran on these trails called the Cold Mountain Game Lands all the time. They were like 10 minutes from my house. I like would drive there with my dog like literally 4 times a week and run on these trails. And the light bulb just came on one day. I was like, wow, I could really put a race on here, like I didn't want to like I feel like race directors, something that I don't talk about very often is I really try to like I have so much respect for the other race directors in this area that I didn't, Asheville has so many great races that I didn't want to like try to step on any of their toes and take runners away from. I didn't want to put on a race that would I wanted to have mutual respect for the other race directors. I didn't want to like borrow their course for part of my course, or like make a race that's too close to their races where runners would have a hard decision. I didn't want runners who would sign up for my race to be taken away from somebody else's race. Or so I really like thought long and hard of like, how can I put together a course that there's never been a race on before? How can I put it at a time of year that it's not gonna like step on some other race director's toes? And this Cold Mountain Game Lands that I found is just this great area that nobody knew about. Like I would go run there all day long and ride my bike and take my dog out, and I wouldn't see another human the entire day. Like it's just this really random area that basically only hunters use. It's just in the middle of nowhere. So I started getting the wheels rolling and just sort of, I didn't really know how to start. I just called the Forest Service and the Wildlife Commission, started, just sending emails out and making phone calls. And it took me about 2 years probably to put together that first year of the race. And it's called the Cold Mountain 50K. We have a 25K version also, all on the same day. The 25K runners, the 50K runners running out and back, and the 25K runners we shuttled into the opposite end of the course, and they just run the opposite direction. And I was a little worried about how that would work out logistically, and it's a lot of work to make it happen. But the runners act like they really love it because they're passing each other halfway through. So all the 50K runners are high fiving the 25K runners. We have a fun little thing that I sort of I didn't want to have course marshals out on every part of the course for like 12 hours in the cold on the side of the mountain. So I came up with this idea where they have to collect like wooden tokens at 3 places. And I was a little worried runners wouldn't like that it kind of sounded silly, but I also wanted it reminded me of Laz making you find a page out of the book on the Barclays or whatever. It's kind of like borrowing a little bit of Laz's craziness there. And the tokens have just been super popular. People love them. It's been the first 2 years. I've only been doing Cold Mountain 50K for 3 years now, and the first 2 years were insanely successful, more than I ever thought it would be. It quickly built a reputation around here, and people were, after the first year, people were telling me they could not wait to sign up and, run it the second year. And so that's just been, I didn't really know how it would work out. I just sort of came up with this idea and hoped it would be a fun little down home race. And it's been so much bigger than I thought it would be, which is incredible. And then I sort of had this goal as a race director that I wanted to have some slow growth. I didn't want to start putting on too many races and get overwhelmed. And I really wanted to like think it out. Like the Cold Mountain race was the one, it was kind of like my baby, my original project that I really wanted to be successful. But then as I started thinking about adding races, I didn't want to do it too quickly. And I didn't want to just have a whole lot of races so I could have a whole lot of races. I really wanted to like put together 3 or 4 that I really love. So last year I had decided that I wanted to have like a mountain race, which is the Cold Mountain, like a pretty hard one. It's not as hard as some races, but it's pretty hard. And then I wanted to have a loop race that is sort of like a timed event, and I want to have a short distance race. And I might eventually do a 50 miler. I think I would like to have a 50 miler, or maybe even a road race. I might even add a road race to the mix. But so last year I added a second race, and it's called the Stillwater Ultras, and it's a 3-hour, 6-hour, 12-hour, and 24-hour race. It is actually held on the property that is next door to my Cold Mountain course, and you can actually see the Cold Mountain course from the Stillwater course, but it's completely different. It's a 1.5 mile loop that runners, it's like a figure 8, and they just run it for as long as they want to run it. And it turned out to be really great, and runners are already telling me. In fact, I had some people tell me this weekend they're like ready to start registering already again. It's been insanely fun and insanely tiring. But I literally, like, I don't make any money race directing. Like, I barely make enough to put the races on and pay for all the costs, but I really do love doing it. And I hope to continue doing it for a long time.
So when do these races take place? When does Coldwater, when's it go on sale, and when does it take place?
Okay, so Cold Mountain is the second weekend in March every year. I'm slightly considering changing that by a week or so because we got snowed out this year. I had to cancel it because we had like a blizzard come in the morning of the race, and I had to cancel it. And then we did it again 2 weeks later. I had to like go through the whole process of trying to like put on the race twice. Um, it's funny that you say the time of year because both of my races are at times of year when the weather can be kind of bad. Stillwater is in December. We ended up having like 50-mile-an-hour winds at that race also. My friends tell me it's called the Corey Curse, where bad weather just follows me everywhere I go. And that seems to be the case here lately. Even at Hellbender, I feel like I can't catch a break with the weather. So Cold Mountain is normally mid March, but I may consider making it more toward the end of March. I haven't decided yet for this year, but we usually start registration in the early fall, like usually around August or September. And then my other race, the Loop race, is in December. It's the first weekend in December. Registration will be starting for it here probably in the next month.
Cool. So, and I think, it's funny you mentioned that about the weather, because some races just naturally attract bad weather. I know, um, a friend of mine, John Harden, puts on a race called Black Toe.
Yeah, I know all about Black Toe. It's horrible weather every year.
Every year, the one year I did it, it was just absolutely horrible, and it's like you just can't get away from the bad weather, and it's like in January, end of January. um it's right around the time of Mountain Mist, and Mountain Mist is another uh, race that generally attracts some sketchier type weather. I know this year it was, it was definitely, there was ice on, it was very, very extremely cold, and there was ice on the trail, and I think it's just I think that's what makes the races, right? Is if they have that reputation of knowing that you're going to run into some sketchy weather, but that's what makes it fun. I mean, obviously people don't let that scare them away from Black Toe, because it's always has a lot of people signed up for it every year. And we all know Mountain Mist is one of the biggest 50K races in the Southeast, when you think about, and it's old and it's been around for a while, and it's just a really popular race. And most people, they don't care, they just go out and do it. So but that's very cool. So we've talked and jumped around with Hellbender a little bit. So like I said, I saw you at Hellbender. um you know how did that day go for you? I know we talked about it started out raining, but like, how did it go? Like break it down. Did it go pretty smoothly for you for the first part of it, or how did it shake out?
Um, so that was my second time at Hellbender. My first time at Hellbender had went awful and was just I had a horrible day and it did not work out. So this year was my second attempt at Hellbender, and honestly, just I know the course like every inch of the course. It's so close to my house, and I trained on it, and um, I had a really great plan, a really great crew. We really had it figured out this time, and it was going really well for me. Starting in the rain at 4:30 in the morning is definitely not what I would prefer because we also started. It was a brand new trail, so it was just red clay mud, and with that kind of rain, it was so slippery. And I mean, just from the very beginning, the rain definitely caused some challenges. It was so muddy and slippery. It was tough to I applaud the people who run that course fast because I mean, in places it was hard to walk. I don't know how some of these guys and girls run it as fast as they do because the wet mud just made it so difficult to move on that course. But other than that, it was going exactly like I wanted it to go for the first, 50 miles. I had a really good first 50 miles. I knew the cutoffs were going to be a thing for me. I'm not a very fast runner. Um, so I, of course, had that in the back of my mind the entire time. But it turns out when we climbed Mount Mitchell and got up to the very top of Mount Mitchell at the aid station, that was when the wind and the hail and the rain set in. And we ended up, it felt pretty dangerous, to go out on the Black Mountain Crest in that kind of weather. I wish you could see some of the videos I have of the hail blowing sideways, into the aid station. We were huddled in the aid station. They had like put tarps up to try to protect the volunteers. And I mean, there were 50-mile-an-hour gusts blowing hail into the aid station. And we had already been soaking wet in the rain, and the temperature dropped to probably, high 30s, low 40s. So we were just like shivering, huddled in the Mount Mitchell aid station, trying to decide when to go back out on the course because it was just so bad, and you're so exposed on the Black Mountain Crest that it just felt really dangerous. And then finally, we realized that if we were going to make the cutoff, that we were going to have to go. So we just went out in it, and having to hold up for that extra 30 minutes. I was only probably 30 minutes to an hour ahead of cutoffs all day long. So having to hold up that extra 30 minutes really kind of put me behind. And so we ran the crest, and to come into Colbert's at mile 50, it's Colbert's Creek aid stations at mile 50. And that was really like, when you leave Colbert's Creek, you have to run for 22 miles through the middle of the night with no crew. So I knew that I wanted to have a really quality stop at Colbert. I wanted to change clothes and get dry for the nighttime and warm, and maybe have like just a change shoes and socks and like a really quality stop. And having to be held up for 30 minutes at Mount Mitchell, we were pushing across the crest. And when you get to the end of the crest, you have to run down Colbert's Creek, which drops. You're descending like, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 feet in a 4-mile trail. So you're dropping 1,000 foot per mile basically to get off the mountain, and running down that in the mud and the wind and the rain. We were falling down. We were, it's just ridiculous. Like, it's hard to even describe how ridiculous it really was. But I ended up, there's a little paved road you come out on, and my good friend Matt, who is also from Tennessee, you might even know him, Matt Cabbage, was running with me. And he looked at his watch and he was like, "You have 7 minutes to get to the cutoff." And so we sprinted like a mile and a half up. And when I say sprint, it was as fast as I could run after doing 50 miles with, on the Hellbender course, it had like 14,000 feet of vert in the first 50 miles or whatever. And so we sprinted to the mile 50 aid station. We literally got to the aid station when they were about to shut off. Like, I was the last runner to make it through the cutoff. They would not let me stay in the aid station. They didn't, like, they said, if you want to continue, you have to get out of it. We're going to give you like a minute to fill up your water, and you've got to go. Or we'll have to cut you. So I did not get to have any sort of a quality stop. It was basically fill up your water bottles and leave. So I pretty much feel like I destroyed my legs trying to make it through that 50-mile aid station. And then next thing you know, you turn around and you're 22 miles through the middle of the night on one of the worst trails. It had standing water, and there's another big climb as soon as I left mile 50. The nighttime ended up being really rough at Hellbender. I had a rough night. The wind was howling, 50 miles an hour all night long and raining, and we were in shin deep mud, and it was just really brutal nighttime. And I made it through the night, and I made it to the mile 72 aid station, but I missed it by about 15, 20 minutes and ended up just making the cutoff. So it was disappointing, and I know I could have finished the race if I had have just been a little bit faster through the nighttime. But it is what it is. I had a great time. I'm going to go back next year and do it again. I have no doubt in my mind that I can get that buckle. I just don't think it was going to happen this year.
Well, it's funny you talk about, because my runner, his name is John Horner. He lives in North Carolina, and so we were crewing him, and he was actually right pretty close to you, because he came up over in the Mount Mitchell right before the hailstorm started. So we were set up down by the parking lot, down there at the bottom parking area. Well, I looked up at my friend and I was following the weather, and I said, we need to get our ass up to the top where that building is, the visitor center. And we ended up setting up underneath that covered area at that visitor center, because he no more than came in than what you were just referring to. The sky just opened up, and that hail and that wind, and John sat there for probably 20 minutes, at least 20 minutes, because he had the same mindset that you had, being on that crest trail. And that weather was just, I mean, and he said even after he got on it, that he was still stuck on the crest trail in some pretty rough weather. And ironically, I remember you coming in to Culver's Creek because we were talking to your crew, because our guy, we were waiting for him as well. And I remember watching you coming in like a bolt of lightning, because you literally just made it. I remember thinking, man, that guy literally just made it in. And my guy ended up missing the cutoff by like 45 minutes. And he said the same thing you said. He said it was just, descending off that trail, it was really, really tough. And the weather was just brutal. And, it's one of those things where you hate to say, well, if this didn't happen, I would have done this, but but realistically, that was one of the worst weather events I've ever seen in my entire life. Just top to bottom. I mean, it was just rain and wind, and it was cold. And we actually talked to a runner that had dropped at that Culver's Creek aid station. Him and his girlfriend were running it together, and they actually started up the mountain, made it 4 miles, and then turned around and went back, because they said it was just far too cold, and they just didn't feel like that it would have been safe for them to carry on. So I applaud you for going through the night. It sounded like you had a really tough conditions overnight. But so you're headed back next year, huh?
Yeah, I'm definitely going back. Yeah, I've made that decision really quickly. I think that I don't like to blame it on the weather, because I go into a race like Hellbender knowing that those mountains are exposed and they're going to be bad. And I felt like I was pretty prepared for that weather. I had a seam sealed jacket. I had, the right layers. I had a warm hat and gloves. And I saw a lot of runners out, that were not prepared. And I pride myself on the fact that I'm used to being in the mountains, and I can handle those kind of weather conditions. I think that, when we left Culver's Creek, we were heading, there's a big climb that gets back up on the Buncombe Horse Trail. And there were runners who, they got about halfway up that climb, and they were like, we're, 22 miles without crew through the middle of the night when you're exposed in that kind of weather, I think was really, a lot of runners were like, I don't know if I'm prepared for 22 miles out on this mountain tonight. And I pride myself that I was prepared for that, and I knew what it was going to require of me but I am mostly disappointed that I just couldn't move a little faster. I really like if I could have just made up 30 minutes somewhere or 40 minutes, I would have finished the race. And I think that in my mind, I'm just thinking, if I can ever catch Hellbender when it's not bad weather, when it's not like that, I think I can do pretty well with it. And I know what it requires, to finish that race. And it, the cutoffs are always going to be a thing for me. That's just such a hard race that I'm just not fast enough to really be so far ahead of cutoffs. But I know that I want to go back, and I'm just hoping, just crossing my fingers that if I go back enough years, I'm going to catch it on the right year where it's the perfect bluebird spring day, and sunny skies, and I'm going to get lucky one of these times. It's a game of percentage.
That's right. Well, it's funny because I was interviewing Jeff Browning, and he lives out in on the West Coast, and he runs out here on the East Coast, and so we were talking about races on the East Coast, and we were talking about difficult races on the East Coast, and he actually talked about Hellbender and how hard it was. And so if Jeff Browning is talking about a race being hard, then
Right.
it's most likely pretty hard, right? Because that guy just torches everything he puts a shoe on, right? And so it just goes to show you that course in that race is no joke. So you're doing Hellbender. I guess as we kind of wrap things up, what else do you have on your calendar? What are the goals you got going forward?
I'm different. As a young runner, I wanted to race a lot, and honestly, if I didn't have kids and I didn't have a full time job and race director, I probably would go to races a lot more often than I do. But the older I get, the more I want to choose like two races a year that I really want to do. And Hellbender is just, I'm always going to be a Hellbender, whether I'm volunteering or running. I'm probably not going to start volunteering until I get at least one buckle from Hellbender, and then I'll start going back every year and volunteering. I'll just always be a Hellbender, I think. That one's just going to be set in my calendar from now on. But other than that, the only other thing that I'm really considering running, I haven't even registered yet, but I know I'm going to, is my good friend Kendall Weaver here in Asheville. He's created a first year race called the Lead Mine 9. And the Lead Mine Trail is on the Hellbender course. They actually took it out this year for the first time because of the new trail there at the beginning. Lead Mine has always been a part of Hellbender course. But so anyway, he's created this 9 mile loop that sort of reminds me of Mid-State Mile. I take that back. It's a 7 mile loop, and you run it 9 times to make 100K. And it's just ridiculous. It's like 2,300 feet of vert per loop. It'll end up being 20,000 feet of vert or something like that for the entire 100K. And it's just gnarly, and it's going to be this small group of just masochist type trail runners. I don't think it's going to be one of those types of events that's going to attract 150 people. It's just too hard. And it's in October. So, I told him I wanted to get through Hellbender and see how my body reacted to the recovery of Hellbender, which has gone better than I thought. So I'm going to run that. I'm going to sign up for it. I don't know how well it will go because I don't train through the summer heat very well. But if I can manage a little bit of training through the summer, that's going to be a thing for me. And then other than that, once fall starts, I kind of have to start going into race director mode and really start preparing for the races I put on. So I try not to run anything. I might jump in last year I did the Headwaters 30K, which is another little local trail run here. I don't want to say that I won't race anymore the rest of the year, because I probably will find something that I'll jump into, but I don't really have a whole calendar of races planned out and don't intend to. My partner Katie, she runs also, so with our two kids and our, lifestyle, we try not to be training for a race at the same time. So since she put so much time into helping me get through Hellbender, now it's her turn. So she has a race coming up in September. So, pretty much my summer is going to be cheering her on and helping her get trained and ready for her race. And then, between race directing and, being a parent, and I don't get to travel races every weekend like a lot of ultra runners do, or we just have too busy of a life. So I'm definitely going to try to attempt to keep my racing to a minimum of just, I have kind of like a goal list of races that I want to get to over the next, 5 to 10 years, and I'll start pecking away at those. But I'm going to keep it pretty minimal for the most part.
So what's her race?
She's running Brandon, our good friend Brandon Thrower, who is another race director here. He has Kanawha Adventures. He puts on the Table Rock Ultra, and she's running that one. It's a race I've wanted to do. I've known Brandon for a long time, and he puts on amazing races. And I'm pretty excited to go in the crew for him so I can see it, and maybe I'll go back and race that one next year or something.
That's awesome. Well, on that note, we will close it out. I appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me. I know you're a busy guy with the family and work and everything else you got going on. So I appreciate you joining me and talking to me about all the cool stuff that you're doing.
All right, man. Thanks for having me. I'd really appreciate you inviting me to be on here.
No, that's no problem. It's what I just enjoy talking to people about running. And like I said, um, I watched you at Hellbender, and I was like, man, I definitely got to get him on soon, because I knew that it was you, that the one that came in at the aid station at the end right before they cut it off. So I knew it was you. So it's just like I can't wait to hear the story behind it, because I wanted to know what happened afterwards. So but it's good stuff. But as always, guys, we'll have this out in video and audio format. Next week there will not be an interview, because I will be backpacking in the Smoky Mountains with my friend Tyler. But then after that, we'll return right back to the interviews as normal. So that's it, and I will see you on the trail.